Hi, my name is Randy with PFlexPRO. The main purpose of this video is to show you how to wrap your P60 drop-in, but more importantly I want to tell you how not to wrap your drop-in. Before getting into the wrapping, I want to show you how to check the battery, change mode groups, and lock the mode groups, and even change the contacts on the drop-in. This flashlight is set for mode group 7, which is 100% only, single output or single mode. We're going to first check the charge state of the battery. The way this works, we will half press, it's a forward clicky switch, so we'll half press it 8 times very quickly. The light will begin to flash showing the charge state of the battery. And the way it works, it starts at 3 volts and each flash represents 1/10 of a volt. So if it flashes 5 times, it would be 3.5 volts. If it flashes 9 times, it will be 3.9. If it flashes 12 times, it will be 4.2 volts or fully charged. So first I will press it 8 times very quickly and then continue to hold on the 8th press. And it will start flashing and we'll count the flashes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So this battery is at 3.9 volts now. Again, it's set for mode group 7, which is high only. Normally when I ship a flashlight or a drop-in, I ship it set to mode group 20. And I choose mode group 20 because it has 5 levels and I record the output for all of these levels and ship it with a flashlight. And so we're going to change it to mode group 20. The way I'll change it is, again, I will press it 8 times very quickly, and when it starts flashing the battery voltage, then I will half press 20 times because we're going for mode group 20. And at the last press, it will after a moment flash quickly to confirm that we've made a change to the mode group. And I'll count up the 20 presses, but first I need to press 8 times quickly. Okay, now for the mode group. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. And it confirmed it. So now with mode group 20, it has no memory, so it will always turn on high. It has medium, low, extra low, and moonlight. And since it has no memory, if we're using it in a lower mode, the next time we turn it on, it always goes on in high. Of the 22 mode groups, there are several of them that have memory, several that have no memory. You have options of strobe and beacon as well. So anyway, that's how you change the mode group. Next, we're going to remove this drop-in. We're going to remove the drop-in and replace the contact on it and lock the mode group. So first, we'll unscrew the head. And then remove the switch assembly. And the battery. The way I remove drop-ins, I don't recommend doing this with any other drop-in unless it's potted. I use a white polyethylene tube. This tube, actually I faced off the end of it so it's perfectly flat, and then I bevel the inside because a spring will insert into the inside of the tube as I press the drop-in out. And the way it works is you just slip it into the flashlight. You make sure that the spring is in the center. You press down on the flashlight while holding the drop-in. And that was in there tight. there's the copper wrap. Now let's take a look at the drop-in. This drop-in has an interchangeable spring system. I'll remove the outer spring. This is a beryllium copper, low resistant, high output spring. And I make the springs interchangeable so that if you ever have a spring wear out or get damaged, or you need to use a protected cell and your battery tube is too short, you can put in a shorter spring, or you can put in a solid button contact. What we're going to put in will be the solid contact. And I merely unscrew the spring. And then the solid contact is threaded as well, so I just screw it back in. You'll notice that the contact sticks up above the potting material just a little bit. And the reason for that, that makes it compatible with both button top and flat top batteries. On the front, there are two small contacts, and those contacts come from the driver board through the potting material. The reason for these contacts, if you want to lock out changes to the mode group, in other words, if you want to choose a particular mode group and set it and make it where it can't be changed again, you just connect these two contacts with conductive paint. That way you will not be able to accidentally change mode groups, which is really unlikely, but if you want to make sure it never happens, you just connect the dots with conductive paint, and you will not be able to switch mode groups again unless you remove the conductive paint with the flat blade of a knife or with some sandpaper. So to lock the mode group, I'm just going to put a little dab of conductive paint between the two. It takes about 2 or 3 minutes for it to dry, and that's it. So we have the solid button contact on. We've locked our mode group to whatever mode group we had it in. I think it was 20. Put the outer spring back on. Also, you'll notice that the shaft of the reflector is polished. Typically, drop-ins have grooves cut into the reflector, a lot of little micro grooves, and they really hurt your thermal conductivity through the shaft of the reflector. All of the heat from the drop-in has to travel through this area on the reflector into your wrapping material and then into your flashlight host. I polish off the grooves. I actually machine them off and then polish the outside of the reflector so that it has really good contact with the copper wrap that I put on it. This drop-in also has what I call, and I'm not sure if you're going to see this, but it has what I call a hybrid reflector. What I have done is taken a smooth reflector and just the very bottom area around the emitter has a satin finish. Most of the artifacts from a reflector are created deep in the bottom where it's reflecting the size of the emitter or the emitter platform, and that creates artifacts within your beam. What I've done is I've created a satin finish in that area just on the bottom part, and that will even out the artifacts from the beam, but it doesn't hurt your throw at all. You still get the throw of a smooth reflector because the center of the hot spot is created by the upper portions of the reflector. Now let's look at wrapping materials. I know many people use aluminum foil tape or copper foil tape to wrap their drop-in. These are actually not very good choices because of the adhesive on the back. The adhesive, even though as with the copper foil tape is considered to be conductive, actually has very poor thermal conductivity compared to the copper or even compared to aluminum. When you wrap with these tapes, half of your cavity is filled up with the adhesive, which, like I said, is a poor conductor, so really you should stay away from these. A better choice than either of the tapes is just using regular aluminum foil. Aluminum foil has half the thermal conductivity of copper, but there's actually another disadvantage. Every time the heat has to go from one layer to another layer, it creates thermal resistance. And I wrapped a drop-in with aluminum foil and found out that there are 25 different or 24 different layers that the heat has to go from one to the next to the next. So that actually reduces the thermal conductivity of the aluminum pack considerably. What's better is to use copper. And since copper has twice the thermal conductivity, it's better to begin with, but also using 4 mil copper like I recommend, you have fewer wraps. You have as few as 4 wraps or 4 thermal gaps for the heat to go through. So I'm going to show you how to wrap with copper. I start with a piece of 4 mil copper, and this copper is cut to 5/8 inch width. Now on one end of it, for about 4 inches, I cut it from 5/8 down to just about a half. And the reason I do that, well, the reason I use 5/8 copper is it's just easier to handle something a little wider. But the wrapping material needs to fit between the bevel on the reflector and the spring. The reason you really want the wrapping material to stay within this space is because occasionally the spring will be slightly larger in diameter. This outer spring will be slightly larger in diameter than the reflector shaft. So if your wrapping material actually goes over the spring, it can be very hard to insert in the flashlight. So you think you have a very tight wrap, but in fact the only place that it's tight is over the spring. So by cutting the copper foil strip, it will now fit in the space required so that the first 4 inches will not overlap the spring. The additional layers will then wrap over, and they will actually overlap the spring, but the first 4 inches has built up the thickness of the reflector shaft so that it is a larger diameter than the spring would be. Now, usually the spring does not create a larger diameter than the reflector shaft, but if you polish your reflectors, as you should, it will reduce this diameter slightly. So I have cut down one end about 4 or 5 inches to a 1/2 inch wide, or maybe just a little wider. I'm just going to snip that off. And now it's time to wrap. So as I wrap, I'm starting with the thin end. And I'm going to wrap it as tightly as I can. And now I've used up all of the narrow end, but you can see I've built up the diameter of the reflector shaft. So I continue wrapping. And pulling it tight. Now there's actually another advantage to having the top layers wider, because as you start inserting it in the flashlight host, these outer layers will crimp down and they will actually stop the copper from sliding, the layers from sliding around. So I've used the entire length of 4 mil copper, and it's nice and tight, and it probably is too tight to go into the host. So what I will do is just try it, and I can tell that's too tight. So now I'm going to cut off about 1 inch. And we'll test fit it again. That feels about right. If I had cut off, actually I am going to cut off a little too much just to show you what you would do. I'm going to cut off another 1/2 inch, even though this is the right amount. I want to show you how to handle if you cut off a little too much. So now this should fit inside the host very easily, and that's too easy. So since I've cut off that's about 3/4 of an inch too much, I'm going to use 2 mil copper, and since it's half as thick, if I cut 1.5 inches, it will make it tight again. So I'll just cut about 1.5 inches, and I'm going to add that back to the copper wrap. Since the 2 mil copper is easy to crinkle and to bend, I'm going to unwrap my 4 mil just a little bit, and I'm going to slip the 2 mil under. And then wrap it back down. That will tighten up my wrap pack. And now it's tight again. Okay, so I have it inserted about 1/3 of the way. I can still grip it with my fingers. If you've ever wrapped a P60, you know the biggest problem is as you press it in, whatever you wrap it with tries to stay out and it'll bunch up under the bevel part of the reflector. So what I've come up with is what I call the fat finger method, or the string method. What I use is a piece of wax coated cotton string. I've tried many different materials, but this wax coated string works real well. You can probably do it with just regular string. The way this works is I will wrap it around the copper pack one time, and then I will wrap it in the groove between the copper and the bevel of the reflector, and I'll give that about 2 wraps. What happens when I pull this string tight, it will wedge down between the copper and this bevel, and it will stop the copper from sliding as I insert the reflector. And also the piece of string wrapped directly around the copper will keep the copper in place and keep it tight. As the drop-in is inserted into the host, it will actually just push this string out of the way. Now I'm not going to pull tight since I barely have the reflector or the drop-in inserted. I'm not going to pull it tight because I run the risk of popping the reflector out until I turn it upside down. Now I'm going to pull the strings tight and press down on the host. And what's happened, the lower string wrapped around the copper just got pushed up. So now there's really too much string in there to push the drop-in into the host anymore. So I'm going to remove the string, and you can see the copper has not moved. It stayed exactly where it was even though it's very tight while I was pushing it in. Now I'm going to wrap it maybe just 2 rounds between the bevel of the reflector and the copper pack. Press again. And now that's probably as far in as I want to push it. And again, the copper stayed exactly where it needed to. I will insert it the rest of the way with the head, just screwing the head on. And it is in there very tight. And as I screw the head on, it will push it in the other 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch. Right there is pushing it in. And that's how I wrap them. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. And the string and pipe method, I don't actually show these on my website. I should show them as a kit, but if you order a P60 drop-in or drop-in with a host from my website and you want this piece of pipe and the wax-coated cotton string, just send a message with the order to include it, and I'll drop in a set for you at no charge.